my prediction is that if no catastrophe happens until the 2024 elections, and if the previous pattern would persist, which it probably won't, but who knows, then a Republican should win, right? As the US needs some time to lick their wounds. But if a transition to a new party system would happen, then a new Democrat is more likely. Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert D. Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. Let's talk about the American presidents and the American party system in general. So in my previous videos, like on the democracy and totalitarianism, on the decline of the Western world, we've discussed how two-party system is an incredibly effective way of governing the society. Basically, the controlling all of the society, right? Where we have the roughly speaking progressive party and roughly speaking conservative party. One is an accelerator, the other one is the brakes, right? But the motion goes forward anyway, right? Conservatives don't actually ask us to return back to the Stone Age or whatever. They're just trying to fix things as they've been on the previous step, right? The conservative program is the progressives program from 30 years ago or something like that, right? So the two-party system has appeared in the US in the beginning of 19th century and has kept developing pretty much until the beginning of 20th, right? So people have discussions about the numbers of party systems in the US. So some people say it's now the fifth, which has been established since the FDR, Franklin, Roosevelt, but whatever. Anyway, in its modern form, it has been established since Theodore Roosevelt or whatever, has incited a schism in the Republican Party, which has allowed the Democrat Wilson to win, right? So it is since then that the Democrats has become the accelerator and the Republicans became the brakes. So the Democrats are now progressives and or at least have been in the previous 100 years, and the Republicans are conservatives, right? The Democrats are the progressives. So, and it is kind of just, you might say, because Democrats are older and have higher degrees in certain societies, if you know what I mean. So, Democrats correspond to the U.S. attacking, roughly speaking, and the Republicans correspond to the U.S. being on the defense. It's kind of curious, but Bill Burr's point about the first ladies of Democrats versus Republicans actually fits here perfectly, right? So the progressive Democrat first ladies are very loud and like get involved in everything, while the Republican first ladies are like super timid and like don't really are not really participating in any significant activities, right? So let's look at some examples. Let's look at Woodrow Wilson, for example. So he screwed up at peace negotiations after the World War I, right? And so he got kicked out. So he's actually lucky that he survived, I might add. So after that, we needed, by we I mean US, even though I'm not in the US, I'm not American, but it's just like for simplicity. We needed a Republican, 12 years of Republican cleanup, right? The post-war isolationism. So we need to be on the defense now. So Harding, for example, received some help, it seems, to leave the office, if you know what I mean. And Coolidge after him also didn't do a great job at fixing things. So another Republican was needed. And finally, Hoover was this Republican. So he fixed things more or less in one term, right? So after this, the Americans could allow themselves 20 years of Democrats. And they've been on the offense, which means, and this had led them to becoming the #1 world power, right? But they've still lost China, among this shebang. Formally, I mean, they've lost the Korean War, but obviously they tried to get into China through Korea, right? So another Republican was needed to fix things, and Eisenhower took office. And then so he was pretty much successful in fixing things. So we have 8 years of Democrats again. So Kennedy obviously also received some help to leave office, if you know what I mean. But it was obviously an outside job, since otherwise the Democrat Johnson would have not won the election, right? But Johnson also failed in China. This time the Americans tried to get into China through Vietnam. So 8 years of Republicans are needed again. We need to lick our wounds, so to speak. And then the disgraceful Jimmy Carter comes to office, who completely misunderstood the new position of both China and Iran and like everything else in the world pretty much. So hence we need 12 years of Republicans again to fix things after Carter. Yeah, so Reagan wasn't really good at doing this job, to be honest. But George Bush succeeded in, again, pretty much returning to status quo as it was before the Carter administration. So, and after this, we have America on the offense again, right? We have Clinton, the unipolar moment, when Americans rejoice the seemingly complete world domination, and get a bit too carried away with this. So the elites have to dial things down a bit, and hence we have the 9/11, right? So we need to kind of fix things a bit again. So Bush was kind of decent in this, but after Bush, arguably, we have problems with a capital P. So, well, you know what I mean, right? The Obama guy. So the first Muslim president, which no one really even knows where he comes from, whether he's American in the first place, right? So something is weird about the system. At least it looks like the political system starts malfunctioning, so to speak. So yeah, some people say he's from Kenya or from Indonesia, or like the official version is from Hawaii, I believe. But it could have been might as well like Bahamas, which is kind of understandable from his last name, which would be read in French as like from Bahamas, right? Or Bahama, etc., etc. So, yeah, so it looked like the American position is solid still under Obama, but like it's kind of questionable. So if it's solid, actually, right, after that, by that logic, we should have had another Democrat, so we can continue accelerating. So Hillary should have won. But again, the old guard of the elites wasn't so sure, and they said nope, and like pulled the emergency brakes and established a Republican, the Trump. Not the Trump, just Trump. Actually, like nowadays it's like the Trump, right? So yeah. So what we can see from this transition, roughly speaking, Obama into Trump, is like, again, some sort of political crisis, right? The Americans aren't actually sure what to do next. Like, perhaps a new, like, reestablishment of the two-party system is in order. So for 100 years, this agreement, the system has been working, right? Since Theodore Roosevelt or whatever. So there was a consensus on the importance of a system itself, but now this system is under question. So Trump was obviously useful as sort of a scarecrow, I don't know, against Europe, right? So Europe is rising in its power, as I've said many times before, again, see my video about the upcoming European domination of the world, or like non-hegemony. So Europe is becoming the sub-hegemon instead of Britain at this point in time. But the problem of Trump that he's scarecrowing against Europe comes at the cost of the long-term stability. Like these older guys, the older elites, pulling this emergency brake and setting Trump into the office is actually very hurtful to the American system itself, right? So the previous pattern while the system was working, it's actually pretty simple and obvious, again, from the examples I've given above. So it's such, if we have like a Democrat, right, and let's say he is succeeded by a Republican after one term, it means like the Democrat is actually very bad. Like he ruined everything, like he accelerated way too quickly and ruined everything in just one term. So we need a Republican to fix things quickly until like everything comes out of control and everything collapses, right? He's very bad, which means. But if he is succeeded by a Republican after two terms, two Democratic terms, then a Republican, it means it's just a regular Democrat, right? We've accelerated a little bit, then we need to slow down a little bit. Like as Lenin said, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? Normal motion forward. If he is succeeded by a Democrat after one term, so a Democrat then the other Democrat, it means that the first Democrat was kind of weak. So he accelerated, but not in the way that the elites want, something like that. If he is succeeded by another Democrat after 2 terms, it means he's actually pretty good. Like, we smoothly accelerated, and the general party line is very good. Like, we can continue with another guy, right? With another Democrat. With the Republicans, it's kind of the reverse, right? If a Republican serves for 1 term and then the Democrat comes, it means the Republican is very good, actually. He fixed things in just 1 term, right? Like Eisenhower, for example. So if he is succeeded by a Democrat after 2 terms, it means that, well, he's kind of a regular Republican. He needed like 8 years to fix things, clean up after the Democrats. If we have a Republican and after 1 term another Republican, it means that the first Republican is actually kind of horrible. Like, he cannot fix anything. We need another guy to actually clean up after the previous attempt at cleaning up, right? So, if we have another Republican after 2 terms of the first Republican, it means that the first Republican is actually bad. Like, he tried for 2 terms, but couldn't fix things anyway, right? So yeah, but what's happening now? Well, it's hard to tell, as I've said. Like, since Obama, like this Obama and Trump, transition, no one really knows what's gonna happen, because again, the Trump election, has been a big question mark on top of all of the American party systems. So you might remember the late November of 2020, where no one really know, like, what the hell, like, who's the president? Like, they kept counting votes for like almost a whole month, which made me make a joke about it. Like, I've called it the quantum states of America, you know, where both Biden won, Trump won, and they've both won simultaneously, you know, like the Schrodinger's cat, sort of. So yeah. So, what's gonna happen now? It's not super clear, let's say, but still we can make some conjectures. All right, we can speculate a little bit. So, usually in the world's history, like, the hegemony lasts like roughly 150 years, and in the middle of that, so let's say 75 years after the beginning of the hegemony of a certain state, the sub-hegemon switches, right? So we've already had these 75 years of American hegemony, and now the sub-hegemon is switching. Like, it used to be Britain, the UK, and the Commonwealth, the British Empire, and now it's the EU instead, right? So yeah. But we don't really know whether this pattern would continue, because again, as I've said, it's only characteristic for national states, and we're already in the epoch where national states are kind of on the very noticeable decline. All right, so we are not really sure whether American hegemony would persist for 75 more years, although it's still possible. Okay, so until the year 2100, after which arguably history would end, like, completely. Again, as the national states would become the thing of the past. See my video Stories of History. I'm going to link it in the description, where I talk about the decline of national states and how our usual understanding of history is connected to them. All right. So, so it seems like a new party system needs to be established with this, like, again, switching of the sub-hegemon, like, general decline of American domination that is already apparent. Like, Americans peaked in, roughly speaking, early 2000s, and now they're on the decline, which may last for 75 years, it may last for 10 years, it may last for 30 years, I don't know. Like, we're in this pretty much new political situation. I would say maybe 30 years is a good estimate, like, first approximation. But anyway, it needs to be the American political system needs to be adjusted for this new reality, the decline of their power rather than rise, which has been the case in the previous 75 years. So yeah, so we can speculate around this a little bit. So you might argue that if we are to sort of just blindly utilize the previous scheme that I've outlined before, to the new situation, you might say, well, Democrats are still the accelerator, they're still the offensive branch of the American political system, but in this case, they accelerate the decay of the US, right? they accelerate basically the demolition of the United States of America, at least as a national state, and perhaps facilitate its transformation into like supranational civilization state of American continent, or continents plural, including the South America, I mean. And the Republicans are still on the defense. They're still trying to save the national state of the United States of America, or something to that effect. But it just as well could be that Democrats would try to, let's say, hijack this European agenda of, you know, like the minorities, the feminism, all the woke SJW crap, right? And counterattack Europe through it, because it's Europe attacking the America with these ideas and basically demolishing American society in the last, again, 75 years. Well, more so like since the 1970s, right? So that would be like 50 years. So, but in order to do so, the US elites have to realize that their domination comes to an end, either very soon, so it's like 30 years, or a little bit more than that, so maybe 75 years. And they have to reorganize themselves to acknowledge this reality. So they've been attacked with this new weapon, with the European cultural bomb, so to speak, and they're getting defeated, essentially. But maybe a counterattack is in order, who knows? So perhaps perhaps Europeans are already ready for this counterattack, so we don't really know. So in this way or another, it seems like a certain rebranding of both Republican and Democratic parties is in order. But to do so, perhaps, like, this process of America losing power is not yet understood. It needs to be eventified, as I talk about in my video, Events versus Processes. So the process is America losing its power from now on, and the event would be something that signifies this loss of power, which could be anything, really. So maybe a civil war in the United States proper, maybe it's something external, maybe it's another banking crisis. Maybe the Europeans would order Putin to nuke some relatively unimportant city like Warsaw, or Tallinn, or Helsinki, or whatever, and the American elites would be like in turmoil. Like they would say, should we respond? Should we not respond? Like, well, what are we gonna do, guys? So aren't we like the world's policemen anymore? Is it not the unipolar moment anymore? And it would provoke the reorganization of the American political system internally, domestically, so to speak. I don't know. So something like that could happen, or it could not happen. I mean, I don't know. So, but anyway, it seems like in the next 10 years, some serious reforms would be made with regards to that, right? Again, Russia would start falling apart, which is perhaps another occasion on which the Americans could adjust their political system to fit the new reality. So the Russia would start falling apart, Europeans would start scavenging its pieces, etc., etc., integrating them into the EU. So maybe, maybe that would be the occasion. I don't know. We'll see. So my prediction is that if no catastrophe happens until the 2024 elections, and if the previous pattern would persist, which it probably won't, but who knows, then a Republican should win, right? As the US needs some time to lick their wounds. But if a transition to a new party system would happen, then a new Democrat is more likely. So if a catastrophe hits, if this reformation would happen, then probably the Democrat is a better option. I mean, more likely. So right now, as you can see, the Democrats are actually more of on a defensive stance, actually, right? The Biden withdrawals from Afghanistan. We have the repeal of the Roe v. Wade. So the abortion is now on the state level again, the abortion issue. So the central government says, oh, not our problem. You guys figure it out on your own. Whereas previously, obviously, all the Democratic administrations were for the increase in the power of the central federal government. So right now it's kind of the reverse, actually. So I don't know. It looks like the Democrats are now the defensive side. At least from these two examples, right? And again, the Biden administration is very hesitant in terms of getting involved in the Ukraine operation, right? The war in Ukraine. Like Boris Johnson did everything he could to drag Americans into this war, right? But he actually kind of failed, right? So yeah, something like that. So who knows? If we're talking about like the faraway future, like maybe 50 years from now, then there is a possibility, for example, for the United States of joining Commonwealth, the British Empire, like make America great Britain again, So perhaps the child of Harry and Meghan would run for the U.S. president. I mean, their children already have an added bonus in the U.S. political sphere of the, people of color in their ancestry. So, I mean, America has the inherently racist culture, which also helped the Bahamas guy get elected, would appreciate that, right? And they also are obviously of the royal family of the UK. So, who knows? So, we'll see. And you might say, well, America would never tolerate like the nepotism and the family members becoming the whatever government officials. Yeah, sure. Like a father and son being the presidents in the span of like 20 years. Then look at the Roosevelt family again. Then look at the wife of the previous president nominating, running for president. Then look at the Congress, which is basically like a family mafia, like there are like generations of congressmen, etc., etc. So yeah, maybe the Anglo-American world would embrace itself and rejoice once again. Who knows? But yeah, if the pattern persists, which it probably won't, then we'll have a Republican, but otherwise some reform probably is in order in the next 10 years. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.